Rich Dad Poor Dad, and let's us play and learn from the book.
That relationship is vital to understand. The primary cause of financial struggle is simply not knowing the difference between an asset and a liability. The cause of the confusion is found in the definition of the two words. If you want a lesson in confusion, simply look up the words asset and liability in the dictionary.
Now, if you remember in the last part, we discussed about asset and liability. He talks about it that the rich, they keep adding asset, and they accumulate assets, and the poor and the middle class people, they create more and more liability. So, and he says that the financial stress comes because of someone accumulating more and more liabilities than the assets. So once you understand what is the difference between asset and liability, then and also based on that you keep adding more assets, then you will be financially better off. And so the distinction of asset and liability talks about that asset is something which put money in your pocket, and liability is something which takes some money out of your pocket. So let's listen.
So my rich dad simply told two young boys the following. An asset is something that puts money in my pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of my pocket. This is really all you need to know. If you want to be rich, simply spend your life buying assets. If you want to be poor or middle class, spend your life buying liabilities.
So that means either way, buying. That means when you are buy something, you are, giving your money away. Okay, that's the buying. But the money is going out to buy what, asset or liability. So that means anything when the money is going out, but whatever is coming in, if whatever is coming in is not putting money in your pocket, then that is a liability. Okay, so that's the difference.
It's not knowing the difference that causes most of the financial struggle in the real world. My rich dad then drew 3 arrows on his diagram. He explained, the arrow represents the flow of cash, or cash flow. In 80% of most families, the financial story is a story of working hard in an effort to get ahead. It's not because they don't make money, but because they spend their lives buying liabilities instead of assets. The first arrow showed the cash flow pattern of a poor person or a young person still at home. The arrow goes into the income box from a job or salary. It then continues into the expense box. Expenses include taxes, rent, and everyday living expenses. It flows out the expense box and is gone. The second arrow Rich Dad drew represented the cash flow pattern of a middle class person. The arrow flows from a job into the income box. It then flows into the liabilities box. Most middle class people acquire many liabilities, such as a mortgage, a car loan, and credit card debt. From the liabilities box, it flows to the expense box, where the monthly payments are made for the liabilities, as well as taxes and living expenses. From there, it flows out the expense box and is gone. The third arrow is a pattern of a wealthy person. This arrow simply flows from the asset box into the income box. The cash flow is not generated by a job or salary, but by assets. Remember, assets are things that put money in your pocket. Additionally, the rich have few expenses and liabilities, or if they do, those liabilities are more than covered by their assets. Examples such as these are oversimplified. Everyone has living expenses, the need for food, shelter, and clothing. The diagrams Rich Dad drew showed the flow of cash through a poor, middle class, or wealthy person's life. It's the cash flow that tells the story. It's the story of how a person handles their money, what they do after they get the money in their hand. I cringe whenever I hear people ask me how to get rich quicker, or how do they start. I often hear, I'm in debt, so I need to make more money. But more money will often not solve the problem. In fact, it may actually accelerate the problem. Money often makes obvious our tragic human flaws. Money often puts a spotlight on what we do not know. That's why, all too often, a person who comes into a sudden windfall of cash, let's say an inheritance, a pay raise, or lottery winnings, soon returns to the same financial mess, if not worse than the mess they were in before they received the money. Money only accentuates the cash flow pattern running in your head. If your pattern is to spend everything you get, most likely an increase in cash will just result in an increase in spending. Thus the saying, a fool and his money is one big party.
So, so we understood now asset and liability, and what do the rich do, and how the middle class and poor people, what they do is, in a nutshell, they keep buying more and more liabilities, and that's why they end up broke. So that's what it is. So we'll move on to our next